Hey everybody, welcome back to Cosmically Curious with Gemini Jess, where astrology meets self-awareness and curiosity leads the way. We have officially crossed over the Aries new moon, and as of yesterday, the sun is now in Taurus. Happy freaking Taurus season. The sun has now joined Venus in Taurus, and we are really going to start feel a more grounded sense of self and our surroundings as we move forward through the second half of April. There are still a lot of planets in Aries, so the Aries energy is not going anywhere, but like I said last week, there's this sense of slowing down and really taking a step back. The Aries season energy can have us going, or planning, doing. And Aries is all about simply being. Allowing yourself to come back into direct experience with life in a very sensual and bodied experience. One of the coolest things about astrology is how the signs all build and support each other to basically accomplish their goals. Because when we think about Aries, it is that spark of life, but you can't really do much with simply just a spark of passion or excitement or an idea. You have to actually create foundations and systems that allow you to bring something into this 3D reality. So like I said last week, Taurus is this idea of taking those Aries bricks, right? These Aries ideas that we created and that we molded over the last month and will continue to mold and shape. But really starting to think about what kind of mud we need to put in between our bricks to build something sturdy and that's going to last. Before we dive into the astrology for the week, I want to quickly touch on what aspects are. So when I'm saying anything like two planets are conjunct each other, they're trine, they're sextile, they're square, or they're opposite, this represents geometric relationships, basically mathematical relationships that these planets are having together. And each kind of aspect, right, represents a different kind of conversation that the planets are having. I'll make a separate educational video on this in the future, but to sum it up very quickly, when we have planets that are trine each other, they're actually in the same element. So things like Aquarius, Libra, and Gemini trine each other, the fire signs, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius trine each other, water and earth, and so forth. So that ideally represents some pretty supportive energy, but sometimes we can be disconnected from the pure energy of that trine. When two planets are squaring each other, that's a 90-degree angle. And you can think of it as like elbows butting each other. They're like, I don't really like what you're doing. I don't really like what you're doing. Let me come through here. And so squares are really this idea of a diamond built under pressure. You may hear squares as being negative or tension or conflict, but we all know that things like conflict in our life are what actually creates the most opportunity for growth. So even though squares can feel a bit stickier, they often create a lot of growth and space for expansion if you know how to work with them correctly. Oppositions represent two planets opposite in the sky of each other. So for example, something in Aries and something in Libra, something in Taurus, something in Scorpio, something in Gemini, something in Sagittarius, etc. And this represents a push and a pull between two energies. Now, most often oppositions show up relationally because it really represents the mirror that people act as in our life. Conjunctions mean that two planets are together in the sky at the same degree. So this week we're really playing with the idea of Mercury and Mars conjunct Saturn, whereas last week they were conjunct Neptune. And this represents the energies fusing together. And conjunctions are really powerful because they actually start a new planetary cycle between the two planets that are conjoining. The last aspect that I talk about is a sextile, which some astrologers consider a minor aspect, but it really is like this flair or this added flavor that you can kind of tap into and can be kind of playful. And the energies really, really work together to support each other in a way that's like, yeah, you go girl, I got you. I'm gonna stand back while you do it, but I'm gonna help you. So that's a quick breakdown of aspects for you all. One of the first things that I really want to talk about today is that we start the week with Mars and Mercury in Aries conjoining with Saturn. Now, last week we had these planets conjoin Neptune. And that was a little discombobulating. That was the desire for action and initiative clouded by indecision and confusion and illusion. Now, we're kind of coming out of that. We've had the Aries new moon. Ideally, some things are made clear to us around our identity, around our desires, around our passions, and around our drive and initiative. Now, Mars and Mercury come and they hit with Saturn, and the tone gets a little bit more serious. Where last week we couldn't quite figure out where we're trying to go and we didn't know how to say what we needed to say, Saturn is now like, hey, you know where you need to go now, and you know what you have to say, so say it. The idea of sobriety keeps coming up for me with Saturn, and not sobriety in the terms of no alcohol or no drugs, but this idea of sobriety and being realistic and honest about where you are at in your life, where you are at with pursuing your passions, where you are at with your ability to effectively and honestly communicate with the people in your life. This Mars-Mercury-Saturn conjunction to me feels very heavy. Heavy in the sense of having like a weighted backpack that you have to like crouch down to get over your back, and you are huffing and puffing to your destination with all these freaking rocks in the back. There's this idea of really being intentional with your action and your voice and having a sense of maturity within your life. Being honest with people. All of the Aries energy really wants to like make quick decisions. It wants to impulsively say things and make things happen. But there's this idea of practicing restraint with Saturn. Where can we think a little bit harder about what we're doing, around what we're saying, so that when we do act, it's like actually worth something and valuable and intentional, rather than just like shooting from the hip all the time, as my dad always says, and really thinking about what you're doing and how you can do it effectively, rather than just doing it to do it. So where we were confused last week with the Neptunian conjunctions, we're a little bit clearer. Things may feel more limiting, but we're more willing to take those necessary, mature adult steps forward for things. We start the week with the moon in Gemini, which gives us a little bit of like, woo, Aries, that was crazy last week. Now we're kind of feeling a little fun. But then right away on Tuesday, the moon moves into Cancer. And every month when the moon moves into Cancer, I feel it. I need to take a bath, I probably need to cry, and I'm gonna feel really introverted. I'm also in my luteal phase right now, so that does not help going into this Cancer moon. But this moon in Cancer is not just any old Cancer moon, because once it moves into Cancer, the moon is going to square all of the planets in Aries. The moon stays in a sign for about 2.5 days. So from most of Tuesday to like early Thursday, there is going to be a lot of room for emotional overwhelm, emotional triggers, and you really just are not going to be able to ignore the things that really make you feel like a little baby again, that make you feel really sensitive. And I would tread lightly this week, especially Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday, around matters of relationship, both platonic and romantic. And I would add to that, because Venus is coming into its conjunction with Uranus and Taurus kind of all week and peaking on Thursday. Venus always shows up relationally, but it can also show up in terms of your finances, in terms of your own self-worth, all of that good stuff. In ways that you are self-sufficient and take care of yourself, your relationship to security and stability. But because of this Cancer Aries square with the Venus Uranus conjunction that's happening this week, there is a very big possibility that relationship stuff is going to show up. This doesn't necessarily have to be romantic, okay? This can also show up platonically. And I would even add to this, because Mercury and Mars being conjunct Saturn, there's this feeling of we are going to have tough conversations this week, and it might trigger us, and it might feel really, really emotional, and it might make us want to run away. It might make us want to hide, but it's ultimately bringing us closer to the people in our life. The other side of this relational drama that may show up this week is the fact that Saturn shows us that nothing good comes easy. Relationships take work. Building your finances takes work. Learning how to communicate effectively takes work. Uranus helps us see new ways of doing things. It's innovative. It's new insights. It's new downloads about how to move forward differently than you have moved in the past. It's this idea that we need to be flexible and innovative and open to new ways of moving forward within our life. We can't just stay stuck all the time. And the Sun and Venus and Uranus are highlighting these parts of our lives that we are stuck in, that we are keeping the status quo of, when really it's time to step forward into something different. I would say that by the end of this week, your relationships could look very, very different, but in very subtle ways. If you are willing to have the hard conversations, if you're willing to express what you need, express your desires, and if you are open to conversation and different perspectives. Because once Venus is done with that conjunction with Uranus, it moves right into Gemini, where it will be for the next month or so. And so it really is this like, hey, we had to maybe have some hard conversations, but that's life. Venus in Gemini reminds us about not only the playfulness that we can have within relationships, but this idea that the people that we relate to have their own big, big, unique minds and experiences and outlooks and doubts and fears. And so we can actually learn so much from people when we just have conversations and are open to new perspectives. Have you ever had a serious conversation with somebody that you love and you go into it thinking one thing about the way that they see it, and you come out of the conversation with a completely different perspective? Having conversations within relationship is what builds intimacy, vulnerability, and love. So that's my spiel on the relational dynamic that you might experience this week. The last two things I feel called to share about this week is the Virgo moon that we are going to have basically the whole weekend. This next weekend is going to be a really good weekend to get things done. I'm thinking spring cleaning, right? We have the Taurus energy here now. So yeah, spring cleaning, crossing off the things that you've had on your to-do list for months. I know I have like 4 or 5 things I could definitely get done, and really just leaning into the Virgo need to really just get off on your to-do list. Just write everything on the to-do list to cross it off. Gotta take the garbage out, write it down, cross it off. My moon is in Virgo in my Vedic chart, and I kind of relate to that a lot. So if Monday through Friday feel like you've got a lot of things going on, you're just emotionally, physically not really capable of doing the damn thing, wait until this weekend or really lean into that Virgo moon and cross that shit off. Make that to-do list, make that spreadsheet, do a little face mask, and get your grocery shopping done for the week. The last thing that I want to talk about that is very much bigger than a 5-minute spiel on Cosmically Curious can give you is Uranus moving into Gemini for the next 7 years. Uranus changes signs every 7 years, and as an outer planet, it more often represents generational and collective shifts within our society. It also will affect you on a personal level, but it's a little bit more isolated because it moves slower. So, for example, if you have any planets in 0-degree Gemini, as I do with my sun, Uranus will be exact conjunct. Now, if you have a 15-degree Gemini placement, that's not going to hit you for a while. So no, not every Gemini's whole life is going to change on Saturday when Uranus moves into Gemini. It's not that simple, and your chart is much more unique and complex than that. Uranus in Gemini, to me, is really about this idea of mental masturbation. Gemini is a very intellectual sign. Gemini loves to consume information. It loves to learn new things. And with Uranus here, we can really see this already shifting and changing in our collective with AI, social media, the mainstream news outlets, and how the way that we consume media is deeply, deeply shifting in what feels like very scary ways sometimes. I'm not going to go into this too much because frankly, I just don't quite have the words. And I believe that it deserves a little bit more time and a little bit longer discussion around what this really represents. But at the core, it really, to me, is the idea of how we consume information, how we get off to the information. Whether the information is true or false, we don't even care. The algorithm just feeds us stuff and we just consume it all day. So the way that we communicate as humans is really going to change. But with every planetary shift, there's always good too. And I am an astrologer who chooses to see the good and the possibilities rather than sit and think about all the bad things that can happen with a transit, because that's just not a way to live or to experience and practice astrology in my eyes. But as a Gemini, there is so much gold to be found in Uranus and Gemini. Our ability to connect and communicate with more people in new and unique ways. Our ability to utilize technology to learn things and see new perspectives that historically we have never had access to. Sure, our minds do not know how to hold all the information. The fact that we can see this information is going to have irreversibly positive effects on our society. We are now aware of the things that happen in the world, and even though it's painful and scary, I do think that that is creating opportunities for us to ideally collectively shift and change things so that our future does not have to resemble the past. And with that said, I hope you all have a splendid week. Happy Taurus season. Get outside, hug a tree. It's 420, so flick that lighter. And remember that you're not supposed to resonate with everything that I discuss on here. Take what resonates and leave the rest. I will be starting a questions of the week, so please submit those questions through my Instagram. I'll be making posts throughout the week over there for you all to submit, whether that is about your personal chart. Yep. Personal chart questions answered here, or about something else within astrology or something completely different. I would be so appreciative if you could like this video, subscribe to my channel, give me a follow on Instagram so that we can continue to connect and explore astrology together. Love y'all. Stay curious.